The clinking of glasses suddenly stopped. My champagne flute, heavy crystal moments before, exploded against the banquet hall wall, showering the stunned faces of our firm's investors with glittering shards. A jagged piece grazed my cheek, a thin line of warmth blossoming. The senior partner, William Thorne, a man whose smile never reached his eyes, simply raised an eyebrow. "Looks like someone can't handle the pressure, Maeve. Maybe it's time you found a less demanding line of work." The broken glass had been a good enough metaphor, even if the timing was less than ideal. My life felt like that now, a collection of sharp edges, scattered and useless. I watched the catering staff carefully sweep up the mess, their faces blank. The small cut on my cheek pulsed faintly. Jobless, homeless, and alone. I knew it was my own doing. My sharp tongue had always been quicker than my sense, and it had finally cut me off from everything. It was 7 years before, when the edges were still neatly aligned, that I first met Michael Miller, Boston in early spring. The air still crisp around the red brick buildings. I was hurrying down Newbury Street, my new patent leather heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the uneven pavement. My resume felt heavy in my hand, a promise of a new life. A new job at a top marketing firm. My thoughts raced, rehearsing answers, ignoring the tremor in my right heel. Then, the sidewalk caught me. One moment I was upright, driven. The next, a twisted ankle, and a sprawl of limbs. My purse flew open, scattering its contents across the cobblestones. A hand, large and warm, was suddenly there, offering a steadying grip. "You all right there, miss?" I looked up, blinking. Michael Miller. His eyes were a clear, unremarkable blue, framed by a scattering of laugh lines. Even then, he didn't have the hard polish of the men I usually moved among. His kindness was an unexpected warmth, a stark contrast to the cold calculation that often passed for charm in my world. He helped me gather my things, a pen, a lipstick, a crumpled tissue. "Those heels look like they're trying to trip you. Every step," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. His voice was low, easy, with a hint of something Midwestern. He stood for a moment longer than necessary, his presence surprisingly steadying. I felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a quiet pull, before he nodded and walked away, disappearing into the lunchtime crowd. I brushed myself off, ignoring the dull ache in my ankle, and continued toward the interview. The lingering sense of him an odd, persistent hum. I got the job, of course. My sharp tongue, in that context, was an asset, not a liability. I was good at selling, at cutting through the noise. A few weeks later, navigating the maze of cubicles and server rooms, I ran into him again. Mike. He was hunched over a sputtering monitor, fiddling with wires. "Looks like your heels got you into the right building," he said, not looking up. Mike worked in IT, a quiet fixture in the background, fixing the machines that kept our fast-paced world humming. We started having lunch in the staff cafeteria, a habit born of convenience. He was always there, eating his sandwich, observing. I'd grab a salad and join him, mostly because it was easier than navigating the office cliques. I told myself it was just a break from the relentless energy of the ad world, a space where I didn't have to perform, but slowly, I found myself drawn to his steady presence, his genuine interest. He remembered details I barely registered about myself. One afternoon, a small, wrapped package appeared on my desk. Inside was a leather-bound journal, embossed with a subtle floral pattern. "Your mother mentioned you liked to write," Mike said, leaning against my cubicle wall, a faint blush on his cheeks. "Happy birthday to her. Hope you like it." My mother's birthday. I hadn't even called her yet. A wave of something akin to shame, mixed with a deeper, unsettling tenderness, washed over me. I felt the heat rise in my own face. A rare occurrence, eavesdropping on my personal calls now. "Are we?" "Miller?" I snapped, a forced laugh escaping me. It was a joke, a deflection, my usual armor. But the moment turned awkward. His smile faded. The air between us thickened, suddenly brittle. I saw the flash of hurt in his eyes before he simply shrugged and walked away. I wanted to call him back, to apologize, to explain the tangled knot of emotion that had prompted my remark, but the words stuck in my throat, tangled with pride. This became our rhythm. His small, thoughtful gestures met by my barbed wit, his quiet affection countered by my cutting remarks, my sarcastic dismissal. He'd offer a compliment, I'd turn it into a punchline. He'd suggest a quiet evening, I'd mock his idea of fun. Yet, he stayed, and despite myself, our relationship deepened. Lunches turned into casual dinners, dinners into official dates. He was gentle, patient. He saw something in me that no one else bothered to look for, something beyond the sharp edges. His love, I realized later, only made me push him away harder. It felt too much, too exposed. I would cancel our plans at the last minute, flirt brazenly with clients or colleagues in his presence. It was a test, a constant challenge. I wanted to see how far I could push before he broke. My pride was a wall, and his kindness a battering ram, slowly chipping away at it, exposing something soft and vulnerable underneath. I hated that feeling. The company holiday party, a year and a half into our official dating, was held at a downtown hotel. The room buzzed with alcohol and forced festive cheer. I was holding court near the open bar, feeling the familiar high of being the center of attention. Mike stood a few feet away, nursing a club soda, observing, as always. A new junior associate, fresh out of college, asked me about him. "Who's that handsome, quiet guy, Ellie?" She giggled. I looked at Mike, then back at her, a tight, artificial smile on my face. "Oh, him?" I said, a little too loudly. "That's just Mike, my babysitter." A few chuckles rippled through the small group. Mike didn't react visibly. His expression remained unreadable. He simply set his drink down, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and said, "I'll be waiting outside when you're ready to leave." Then he turned and walked out, his back straight, leaving me with a strange, confusing mix of disappointment and grim satisfaction. He's weak, I thought. He'll never leave me. 6 months after the holiday party, a quiet Sunday morning in our small Boston apartment, Mike proposed. I was still half asleep, tangled in the sheets, watching dust motes dance in the weak sunlight. He was making coffee, the rich smell filling the air. He walked in, mug in hand, and sat on the edge of the bed. "I think we should get married," he said, without looking directly at me, simply stirring his coffee. There was no kneeling, no ring, no grand pronouncements. It was just a statement, as calm and steady as he was. A surprising peace settled over me, pushing away the usual frantic energy. I felt a rare sense of quiet acceptance. "Okay," I said, and the word felt right. Settled. In that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. And to him. I would be better. The promise lasted less than a month. Old habits, deeply ingrained, found their way back. The sharp edge of my wit, once so effective in the boardroom, turned against him. A misplaced sock, a forgotten grocery item, a quiet evening spent reading each became a target. "You can't even remember to buy milk, Mike?" I'd say. My voice laced with a derisive laugh. He would just nod, then go out to buy the milk. His face unreadable. Our wedding was a small affair, just family and a few close friends at a local garden. Mike looked genuinely happy, a soft smile curving his lips as he recited his vows. I felt a different kind of happiness, more reserved, a quiet satisfaction in the commitment, in having secured him. My dress was simple, elegant, not showy. It suited the muted joy I allowed myself to feel. My career, meanwhile, was soaring. I thrived on the cutthroat competition, the endless chase for the next big client. The recognition, my ambition was a constant engine, driving me forward, leaving little room for anything else. Mike's stable IT job, fixing networks and troubleshooting software, seemed mundane to me. It was a comfortable living, yes, but it lacked the sparkle, the constant challenge I craved. His steady paycheck was a foundation, but to me, it felt like a ceiling. It became a frequent target for my derision. "Another thrilling day in the server room?" "Mike?" I'd ask, feigning interest, my tone betraying my boredom. My friends were much like me, sharp, competitive, career-driven. Over expensive cocktails or late-night dinners, they affirmed my cynical worldview. Our conversations a constant reinforcing echo chamber. A man needs ambition, Ellie, one would say. After I recounted a particularly dull detail about Mike's work. You're still young, you need a reliable man, another would add, subtly validating my complaints. Their opinions, always just below the surface, quietly reinforced my worst instincts towards him. Then came the dinner party. It was at our place, a small gathering of my colleagues. The wine flowed freely, and my confidence grew with each glass. Mike, as usual, was quiet, observing. Someone asked him what he'd do if he wasn't in IT. His face lit up, a rare, open expression. I've always thought about opening my own repair shop, he began, his voice earnest. Small, local, help people with their computers face to face. A dream, simple, and honest. I heard it, and something in me tightened. Oh, Mike, I laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that cut through the polite murmurs. That's rather quaint, isn't it? A small shop? Don't you think you're lacking a bit of ambition there? After all these years in corporate, you want to fix home PCs? The words hung in the air, cold and precise. The room went silent for a beat too long. Mike's face went blank, the light in his eyes, the one I had admired on Newbury Street, dimmed, replaced by a quiet resignation. A familiar retreat. He simply nodded. Just an idea. He didn't speak much for the rest of the evening. I told myself I was pushing him, challenging him to be more, to match my own drive. He needed a little nudge, a little fire under him, didn't he? To want something bigger, grander. Our sex life, once passionate and frequent, became infrequent, strained. There was a distance, a coldness I rarely acknowledged. He would try to reach for me in bed, and I would turn away, feigning sleep or a headache, another casualty of the chasm growing between us. He tried, sometimes, to bridge it. Maybe we could get away this weekend, he suggested once, holding my hand after a particularly silent dinner, just the two of us, up north. I pulled my hand away, already scrolling through emails on my phone. Can't, Mike. Too busy. Deadlines. I still felt a perverse satisfaction in his patience, in his quiet endurance. It confirmed my belief in his perceived weakness. He was always there, always waiting, always forgiving. This, I told myself, was what a stable marriage looked like. He never left. Therefore, everything was fine. Years folded into each other. Our routine solidified into something comfortable, if cold. Dinners were eaten, usually with the muted flicker of the evening news on the television. Mike would often read a tech journal, or tinker with some gadget, while I scrolled through industry news on my tablet, occasionally firing off an email. The silence between us wasn't heavy, not exactly. It was simply there. A vast, familiar space. My life remained a blur of deadlines, client pitches, and late-night calls. The advertising world was my world, a place where quick wit and sharper instincts were rewarded. Mike's quiet existence, his steady, predictable work in IT, became almost invisible to me. He was a constant, a background hum I no longer consciously registered. He started spending more time on what I'd begun to call his nerdy hobbies. He'd be down in the spare room, now crammed with computer parts and soldering irons. For hours, he was building custom PCs for friends, experimenting with open-source software. I used the phrase nerdy hobbies with a slight, almost imperceptible curl of my lip whenever it came up in conversation, either with him or with my more polished friends. It conveyed a dismissive, playful contempt. Then he found something else to fill his time. He started volunteering at a local community center, helping seniors navigate their new tablets and connect with family on video calls. They just need a little patience, Ellie, he'd say over dinner, his eyes bright with a quiet satisfaction. Most of them just want to see their grandkids' faces. A waste of your valuable time, Mike, I'd respond, not looking up from my phone. You could be putting that energy into something that actually advances your career. Networking, a certification, something that pays off. My words were precise, unyielding. I believed them, truly. Time was currency. His attempts at meaningful conversation became less frequent, and when they did occur, they were met with my distracted replies or, more often, a sarcastic put-down. He'd tell me about a new software update, or an interesting problem he'd solved at work. I'd just hum vaguely, already thinking about a new ad campaign. One evening, he was particularly animated. "You won't believe it," he said, pushing his plate away, a rare sign of excitement. "Old Mrs. Henderson, she finally got her webcam working. Her granddaughter's in Australia. She hadn't seen her in 2 years. Not really. She cried Ellie. Happy tears." He looked at me, his gaze seeking mine, wanting to share the simple joy of it. I was engrossed in an industry article on my phone, my thumb scrolling automatically. I barely looked up. "That's nice, dear," I mumbled, my voice flat. "Pass the salt, would you?" He paused, his hand hovering over the shaker, then picked it up and handed it to me. The light in his eyes, brief and vulnerable, faded. He didn't say another word about Mrs. Henderson or any other senior. That night, slowly, imperceptibly at first, Mike stopped sharing. He retreated, his shell thickening. The vibrant spirit, the one that used to shine through his quiet demeanor, eroded under my constant barrage. He was still there, physically, but his emotional presence receded further and further into the background. Sometimes, a flicker of guilt would spark within me, a fleeting thought that I was too hard on him. But I quickly suppressed it. He knew who I was when he married me. He loved me precisely because I was strong, successful, driven, not despite my flaws, but because of the woman my ambition made me. That's what I told myself. A convenient truth. Our home, once a symbol of a shared future, felt different now. For Mike, I imagined, it had become a gilded cage, comfortable but confining. For me, it was a glorified hotel. I slept there, occasionally ate there. But my real life, my true purpose, was outside its walls. Then I started noticing the late nights. He'd arrive home after I was already in bed, sometimes after midnight. "Work," he'd explain, vague. Or, "volunteering." His answers were always plausible enough. A nagging suspicion, thin as a razor's edge, began to form in the back of my mind. I'd dismiss it immediately, though. It was just my paranoia, a byproduct of my high-stress job. Mike, he was too loyal, too unassuming, too, well, unambitious, to ever betray me. It simply wasn't in his nature. The day was a blur of caffeine and sharp edges. A crucial presentation loomed, one that could make or break our firm's next quarter, and my stress levels were at an all-time high. I was putting the finishing touches on my slides, meticulously checking figures, when I realized I needed a specific historical data set. It was tucked away on an old project folder, a file I'd given Mike years ago to archive on his personal laptop, which he'd left at home before heading out to work. I walked into our quiet apartment, the silence heavier than usual. I found his old work laptop, a bulky, dented machine he rarely used now, on his desk in the spare room. After powering it on, I navigated through his organized folders, searching for my files. That's when I saw it, a folder hidden deep within his personal documents, labeled simply, Community Center Docs, a peculiar choice. Considering his usual meticulous organization for work-related items, curiosity, a rare emotion for me outside of business intelligence, piqued. I clicked it open, expecting dry spreadsheets, perhaps budget reports for his volunteering. Instead, a list of emails unfolded, sender names clearly visible. Sarah. My heart gave a strange, uneven beat. The subject lines were innocuous enough at first, regarding volunteer schedules or event planning. But then I scrolled down, the language shifted, tenderness bled through the lines, shared dreams woven into casual remarks, then explicit expressions of deep affection. One email, dated just last week, ended with, "Can't wait to see you tonight, my love." A cold dread spread through my chest, colder than any Boston winter. The shattered champagne flute from so long ago flashed in my mind. A grim premonition, now fully realized. My fingers trembled as I scrolled, frantically now, through years of correspondence. My blood turned to ice as I pieced it together. A secret relationship, woven quietly into the fabric of his volunteering, nurtured over years. The late nights, the vague explanations, they all clicked into place, forming a coherent, agonizing narrative. The betrayal hit me with a physical force, a primal rage I'd never known. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a hot, sharp twist in my gut, a pounding behind my eyes. This was not the mild irritation I felt when he forgot the milk. This was something that tore through the carefully constructed facade of my life, of our marriage. He walked in around 7, his usual time, carrying a small bag of groceries. The apartment, usually a haven of quiet indifference, crackled with unspoken tension. He set the bag down on the counter, turning to greet me. I didn't let him. I held up the laptop, its screen still glowing with the incriminating words. "What is this, Mike?" My voice was tight, a hiss barely contained. Then the rage broke free. "What is this, you lying bastard?" I screamed, throwing the laptop with all my force. It clattered against the wall, falling to the floor with a dull thud, the screen cracking. Tell me about your love." Mike, caught completely off guard, stood frozen, pale, and defeated. The grocery bag slipped from his hand, a carton of milk rolling across the floor. He looked at the cracked screen, then at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, something like exhausted relief. He ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders slumping. "Ellie," he started, his voice barely a whisper, broken. I can explain." "Explain what?" I shrieked, advancing on him. "Explain years of this? Explain my love? Explain how you could do this to me?" He looked down, his gaze fixed on the broken laptop. "Sarah," he confessed, the name a dull echo in the room. She was kind. She listened. She understood." He looked up, his eyes pleading. "She was the kindness and understanding I desperately craved, Ellie, the respect I hadn't found at home." I heard his words, but they were filtered through a red haze of fury. His pain was irrelevant. I fixated only on the betrayal, the public humiliation I envisioned. My husband, the quiet, unassuming Mike, the man I considered too unambitious to leave me, had found someone else. He was talking about loneliness, about cravings. I heard only deceit. He tried to reach for my hand, to explain further, to make me see the gaping chasm between us that I had helped create. But I pulled back. I refused to listen, refused to acknowledge my role in pushing him away, consumed completely by my wounded pride. Reeling from Mike's confession, the initial shock quickly gave way to a cold, calculated fury. There was no room for tears, no space for sorrow. My first thought wasn't about what we had lost, but how to make him pay, how to utterly destroy his life, just as he had, in my eyes, destroyed mine. This was my world, after all. A world of strategy and impact. I needed details. I found Sarah's full name in the emails and went to work. A quiet, furious detective. It didn't take long to find her online. Sarah Davis, a teacher at the local elementary school, a beloved figure in the community. Judging by the PTA newsletters and school website photos, she had a kind, open face, the kind that drew people in, the kind that Mike had been drawn to. A plan began to form, precise and devastating. It would be a masterpiece of public humiliation, designed not just to hurt Mike, but to obliterate Sarah's reputation and career as well. The thought felt cold, hard, and immensely satisfying. I knew how to craft a narrative. My professional instincts kicked in. Honed by years of manipulating public perception, I carefully selected the most incriminating emails, highlighting the tender phrases, the shared affection. Then I fabricated the rest. Mike, the family man, preying on a vulnerable teacher, exploiting his position at the community center. I packaged it all up, an anonymous tip, and sent it to a local tabloid known for its sensationalism. The story exploded. It was a juicy headline. Local teacher, embroiled in scandal with married IT professional. The newspaper ran with it, painting Mike as a serial cheater, a predator, and Sarah as a manipulative homewrecker, a danger to impressionable young minds. The details, twisted and exaggerated, were everywhere. Mike's quiet life shattered. The dreams of his small tech repair shop, the one I had once openly mocked, dissolved before they even began. Potential clients, seeing his name dragged through the mud, abandoned him. Sarah, I heard through the grapevine, was immediately suspended from her teaching job. Her reputation was in tatters, her career in jeopardy. The community that once cherished her, now whispering behind her back. I watched the news reports unfold, the local channels discussing the scandal. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing Mike's downfall, a sense of justice, however distorted, being served. The phone calls started coming in from concerned friends, from colleagues who had seen the news. I played the role of the devastated wife perfectly, my voice trembling with practiced sorrow, my carefully chosen words painting a picture of shock and heartbreak. They offered sympathy, shook their heads at Mike's supposed duplicity. Then Mike called. His voice was broken, raw with despair. "Ellie," he pleaded, "you have to stop this. You're destroying her life. You're destroying my life. You brought this upon yourself." "Mike," I replied, my voice calm, cold, and unwavering. "You made your bed." I hung up before he could respond, leaving him with the deadline. A perverse sense of triumph filled me. I had won. I had asserted control. My colleagues at the ad firm, while feigning concern, offered a different kind of admiration. "Ruthless, Ellie," one said, a glint in his eye. "But effective." Another clapped me on the shoulder. A survivor, they saw what I saw. Not a broken woman, but a formidable opponent. A woman who knew how to fight back. If you're still listening, stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. My triumph, sharp and intoxicating at first, proved to be short-lived. The public narrative, which had initially swelled with sympathy for the wronged wife, began to shift, slowly at first, then with an accelerating momentum. The same local media, always hungry for a new angle, found one. An investigative journalist, intrigued by the sensational details, decided to dig a little deeper. It started with whispers. Then, anonymous sources began to speak. Former colleagues, friends I had dined with, clients I had worked with. All of them, suddenly, had stories to tell. Stories of my harshness, my relentless ambition, the cutting remarks, the verbal abuse masked as wit. They described me as manipulative, controlling. My professional persona, carefully constructed over years, was dissected and laid bare. The media, ever the opportunist, seized on this new perspective. The headlines, once sympathetic, flipped. I was no longer the victim. I was portrayed as the vindictive, controlling wife who had driven her quiet husband into the arms of another, and then, in a fit of rage, destroyed 2 lives. My carefully crafted image began to crack, then shatter. Public opinion, as fickle as the latest trend, turned sharply against me. The accolades for my ruthlessness, once whispered admiringly, now echoed as condemnations. The backlash was swift and brutal. Clients, wary of negative publicity, started pulling out of contracts. My phone, once a constant source of new business, grew eerily quiet. Then came the call from my boss, William Thorne. He invited me into his office, the same polished room where I had once celebrated my biggest wins. His expression was grave, his voice measured. He spoke of concern about the negative publicity, how it was affecting the firm's image. He subtly suggested I take a leave of absence, a period of reflection to handle personal matters. I knew what it was. It was a forced resignation, a polite dismissal. I walked out of that office, the heavy glass doors closing behind me, feeling the cold weight of unemployment. My once stellar career, the very core of my identity, was incinerated by the flames of my own revenge. I was jobless, the architect of my own ruin. My expensive apartment, once a gleaming symbol of my success, felt empty, cavernous. It was haunted now by my solitude, by the echo of my own biting remarks and Mike's quiet retreats. I tried to rally my friends, the competitive, career-driven women who had once affirmed my cynical worldview. But their responses were vague, their excuses flimsy. They distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with my toxic reputation, my name now synonymous with scandal. The phone calls stopped. The invitations ceased. I was truly alone. The cold reality of my situation set in with an icy grip. There was nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The self-sufficient woman, the one who prided herself on needing no one, found herself entirely unmoored. There was no Mike waiting to pick up the pieces, no quiet, steady presence to fall back on. He was gone, and I had pushed him away long before the emails were ever discovered. Finally, with a sense of grim finality, I filed for divorce. It was a mere formality, paperwork to acknowledge the utter wreckage of our lives. I moved out of the apartment soon after, carrying only a few boxes of my most personal belongings. The rest, the furniture, the decor, the memories, I left behind. As I locked the door for the last time, the memory of the shattered champagne flute, so long ago, flashed in my mind. It was a stark reminder, a cold prophecy fulfilled. This was my lowest point. The stale air in the motel room smelled of disinfectant and old smoke. Fluorescent light hummed from the ceiling, casting a harsh glow on the worn carpet. My new address, a nameless room on the edge of town, felt like a physical representation of my crumbled pride, my broken spirit. Each morning brought the same dull ache, the realization that this was all I had left. My days blurred into a monotonous cycle. I drank cheap wine, the kind that left a metallic taste in my mouth, and replayed my life. Every word, every sneer, every dismissive gesture came back to me, unbidden and unforgiving. I saw my actions through new eyes, stripped of the self-justification and ambition that had once fueled them. The truth, stark and painful, finally settled. I had always been the architect of my own misery. I had driven away anyone who truly cared, mistaking their patience for weakness, their love for something to be exploited. The memory of Mike's kindness, his steady patience, his quiet, unwavering love, now cut deeper than any of his betrayals. It wasn't the affair that stung the most. It was the slow, systematic erosion of his spirit that I had inflicted. I saw how my relentless cruelty, my constant need to diminish him, had chipped away at him, piece by agonizing piece, until he sought solace and respect in another's arms. I had pushed him, relentlessly, until he finally broke free. One afternoon, the television, a small, grainy screen in the corner, was tuned to a local news segment. I was half listening, half lost in my own bitter thoughts, when a familiar face appeared. Sarah Davis. The segment featured her, glowing, surrounded by children and parents. After a long, arduous battle, she had been reinstated as a teacher. The reporter spoke of her resilience, her unwavering dedication to her students, the community's overwhelming support. I watched, a knot forming in my stomach. Then, the camera panned. And there he was, Mike. He stood by Sarah's side, a quiet smile on his face, a calm contentment etched into his features I hadn't seen in years. His hand was resting gently on hers. He looked different, lighter, settled. The report went on to say that Mike, having found a new start in another town several states away, was now running a successful small tech business. He was supporting Sarah, standing by her, their faces radiating a quiet joy. I watched it all, the wineglass forgotten in my hand. A pang of genuine regret, a deep, agonizing remorse, finally pierced through my hardened heart. It wasn't just the loss of him, or the loss of our life together. It was the crushing realization of what I had forfeited, what I had destroyed. I saw a peaceful, happy Mike, a man I had systematically driven from my life, and, in doing so, had systematically destroyed my own. The full weight of it settled on me then. Mike had moved on. He had found happiness, respect, and a quiet dignity that had always eluded me. I, on the other hand, was left with nothing but the bitter harvest of my own actions, a motel room, and the echoing silence of regret. I understood, with an absolute clarity, that I had paid the price for my cruelty, not just for the affair, for the public humiliation I had orchestrated, but for every callous word, every dismissive gesture, Every single time I had chipped away at the good man who had loved me, I didn't reach out. I knew I didn't deserve to. There was no apology grand enough, no explanation sufficient to bridge the chasm I had created. He had found his peace, and I had found mine. A solitary, painful lesson in humility. A constant reminder of the bitter taste of my own making. This was my penance, served in the cold, unforgiving light of a cheap motel room, alone. The motel room was quiet, save for the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant murmur of traffic. I sat on the edge of the bed, the last sips of cheap wine warming my throat. There was no grand epiphany, no sudden, blinding light, just the quiet, persistent truth, unadorned and unmerciful. I had always been the architect, the one who built walls, not bridges, the one who mistook sharpness for strength and patience for weakness. Mike's kindness, his unwavering belief, had been a soft place I continuously poked and prodded, trying to find its breaking point, and I had found it. The cold realism of it settled in my bones. I had chosen this path, laid the stones of my own isolation, one cruel word, one dismissive glance at a time. Mike had simply found an exit I had inadvertently provided. He had found peace, a quiet happiness that shone from the grainy television screen. He had rebuilt, with someone else, the life I had so casually dismantled. There was no anger left, just a hollow ache where pride used to be. The bitter harvest was mine alone, and I sat in its shadow, a solitary figure in a cheap motel room. There was no one to blame but myself, and no escaping the quiet, constant reminder of what I had lost.